to a funky beat. We're gonna walk inside and just whip up, put the food on my plate and some coke in my cup. Give me some chicken, flakes and fries, living past me and lettuce on my passion by. So keep shoveling onto my plate.
Yay! Welcome to Storytime with Boots. I got a very special guest today, my man Jorge Lopez, and we are going to talk all things health. Really take a deep dive into a lot of things that I think are going to be eye-opening for people, from drinking water, diet, medicine, herbs, vitamins, essential oils. There's a lot of good people out there doing podcasts on this stuff now, but Jorge has a lot of knowledge on this. Jorge is a guy who had everyday guy, got up to 400-some pounds. Me and him many a times went to fast food restaurants and tore up, but has completely done a 180.
They stayed the course, and I was thankful for that too, because I knew at that time I wasn't ready for it. My mindset around athletics was just I was big, so I could do it. It wasn't that I had top talent and had the structure and the regimen, to really excel in that light. And that's why we were kind of middle of the road in that regard. But,
right, it is what it is, right?
But yeah, but as I was getting to, by graduation, I was around 330 because, again, when you're of a certain programming, you just operate along that line. And the majority of that nutritional program that we all receive comes from home. And I was eating, the way in which, my family ate. And at that point, wasn't really causing any issues outside of I was carrying more weight than I should have.
Sure.
But
it didn't seem uncommon. I think what a lot of people can relate to is a lot of people, we eat very similarly in the U.S., whether it's you have your steak dinner with mashed potatoes and maybe you have some vegetables in there and some bread, or you might order fast food, once a week, you get that pizza coming. It's very typical of the American diet. So to go your whole life and that's what and then all of a sudden you come to a point where, you've gained even more weight. You're up to about 400. I guess take us through that change and what really hit home for you.
Well, let's actually focus on the standard American diet first before I get there. Really understand that, the food pyramid that's put out by the FDA, that's recommended by all doctors, all nutritionists, is not something that medicine validates. They don't believe in it. Because when you understand medical employer protocol, nutrition is not a part of the formula that they use to prescribe medicine, to prescribe the solutions that they're giving people for medical diagnosis that, they don't understand where that's coming from. When in reality, it's your intake. It's your intake on a daily basis from a food perspective at the foundation, but then spreading out to the other environmental, pieces to your consumption that are leading to the adverse health, experiences that we're going through.
Well, in one example then, so some people may argue that, okay, if you have diabetes, doctors are going to tell you to lay off sugar. They're obviously going to give you prescription meds. Isn't that, in essence, them using nutrition as, I guess, a formula to, help whatever symptoms that you have? I guess it's not preventative, up front, but I guess once you get it. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, I mean, it's more reactive.
Reactive, exactly.
Versus,
that was the word I was
versus
looking
the
for.
proactive means that actually falls back on you, the individual, to be proactive about. Your doctor's not there to help you be preventative. That goes against the business model that is healthcare.
That's what you were saying.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. Which is also why, but two, even from a board certification standpoint, if any clinician during their boards mentions nutritional protocol as a part of how they're going to treat a patient, they fail their board certification because medicine does not validate nutrition as a part of treatment protocol. They say all your doctors are going to say, eat right, exercise, lose some weight. But your doctor can't tell you what to eat to fix your high blood pressure. Your doctor can't tell you what to eat to help your kidneys better process if you're going through renal failure. Or they're going to tell you from cancer protocols. We understand as medically that cancer is fed by synthetic sugars. Your oncologist is not going to tell you to eliminate sugar from your diet. Eat whatever you want is what they say, because what they're trying to do is manipulate the body's natural mechanisms with synthetic adulteration or prescription pills. And that's the piece that has us cycling in this process of, synthetic overdosing protocols. Let's look at, the U.S. landscape right now. 70% of the population is obese or overweight because of our synthetic consumption from a food perspective. The other piece of that is we've got an antibiotic resistance crisis brewing right now because the average 3-year-old by their 3rd birthday has consumed 8 antibiotics by that time. We've got an opioid epidemic because of the lies of pharmaceutical companies during the research processes to get these patents, get these approvals. That's why 8 out of 10 that are suffering from opioid dependence. And
do you think that has something to do with diet?
Direct correlation to diet.
Direct
correlation. Well, let's look at inflammation. Is one of the biggest causes of dietary distress, because the majority of foods that we are approved to eat in this country, or let me say, the majority of foods that we tend to gravitate toward most are acidic based. And it starts there. I'm not going to name some names, but personally, I've got people connected to me that after an athletic injury, their body had a really hard time with recovery because they didn't understand how to eliminate the inflammatory factors from their diet. So their pain threshold kept going higher and higher and higher to the point where they needed synthetic support to cut that factor off in the body. And that became an opioid dependence.
I see. So their pain threshold is getting higher and higher. They can withstand a lot more pain, but they're never actually treating the problem.
Correct. Because at the root of it is inflammation from your daily intake, which is not allowing you to get ahead of, maybe the structural issue or the mental issue that is causing, all of those factors of pain. So you're turning now to a synthetic substance to help turn that factor off in the body, which is ruining, everything else the body utilizes in regard to how it processes what you take in. So now, you're dependent on these things and causing all the harm that we see happening all around us, especially in Delco.
So from a nutritional standpoint, to help treat something like that, an athlete out there has an issue, has inflammation, what would you recommend? I know there's some anti-inflammatory herbs or things out there like turmeric, and you have apple cider vinegar, if I recall, cayenne pepper.
Great digestive support, which helps to move mucus and inflammation trapped in the GI tract. But bigger than that, I'm going to say polyphenols. Fresh fruit, vegetables, every single day needs to be, ramped up in all of our nutritional intake protocols, because polyphenols, which come from blueberries, or blackberries, currants, wild Alaskan blueberries, eggplant actually contains polyphenols, nuts contain polyphenols. They help turn off the inflammation response system in the body to allow the body to process out that inflammation, which at the source is mucus. Acidosis is the cause of all disease development in the body, because acidosis is the onset of mucus production through our membranes. We've got a ton of membranes in the body that produce mucus. Your mouth is one, your nose. All external entry points to the body have a mucous membrane that helps hold and trap bacteria to protect the body from that invasion. But once we get into the GI tract, where 90% of your immune system is housed, when you consume anything acidic, the body has to encapsulate that thing in mucus so that the body can digest that through the normal process, which is where, anybody that's doing any kind of GI research will understand a 10-ounce steak, in some cases, will take 3 weeks to pass through your GI tract.
Wow.
Think about that. You consumed dead flesh for nutrition, and that dead flesh is going through its natural rotting process through your GI tract over the course of 3 weeks. And you do this every day. Those that are consuming meat-centric diets, and you're wondering why at 30 you now got high blood pressure.
Is that in particular to red meat or something like chicken as well?
Chicken as well. The biggest cause of fibroids that we're learning about in women is the arsenic consumption from chicken. The feed that chicken are eating today has microdosing of arsenic. Apple juice has microdosing of arsenic.
Oh, I love apple juice. Shit. I drink it all the time.
From that standpoint, the more natural, the better, because arsenic is a healthful compound in the body, as it helps offset other inflammatory factors. But when you start consuming too much of any synthetic vitamin, that's the thing that will cause the storage of those synthetics. And a lot of people don't understand how fat works in the body. Fat is a part of our immune system. When you consume anything synthetic, yes, the body's resilient and can use it for nutrition, but the body in most situations can only use 10 to 20% of a synthetic nutrient versus a natural nutrient. And from that standpoint, when you consume that, the body will use what it can, it will waste what it can, what it can't waste, it will store. The more weight a person is picking on demonstrates the more synthetics they're consuming on a daily basis. And where that becomes dangerous is we have like 4 types of fat in the body. Subcutaneous fat is the fat that's under the skin, but our visceral fat is the most important fat in the body, but it's also the most dangerous when it comes to our health, because when toxins start absorbing into the visceral fat, which is the fat surrounding your major organs, heart, liver, kidney, lungs, stomach, brain, that is the fat that can produce hormones. That is where hormonal cancers originate. And when you go to an oncologist and you ask, so doc, where does this stuff come from? The 2 answers that they give are hormonal or environmental, but there's coding there. They don't connect those 2 for you to understand that the hormonal breakdown your body's going through is because of your body's inability to tolerate any longer the environmental contamination that it's receiving on a daily basis. So if you were to understand at the base of it, to eliminate your synthetic consumption, you'll see your diagnosis improve. I've got people in my network right now that are overcoming some of the most debilitating forms of cancer and other, medical diagnoses by understanding that synthetic elimination is the key to health restoration, health recovery.
Now, from an aesthetic standpoint, what about the skinny people out there that are eating the same garbage as the heavier people? Mm-hmm. How come they're skinny? Or
they've just got a higher functioning metabolism. Their body has a higher tolerance to the synthetics that they're consuming, whether it's genetic, whether it's, just luck of the draw, to be honest. But let's look at that standpoint too. And I think I threw this at you during our prep call, but from 2000 to 2012, the United Kingdom, England, where soccer is global dominance over there, it was something like 112 athletes die like on the field.
What?
Soccer players.
112 soccer players died on the field?
112 because of the lack of emphasis on proper nutritional intake. These guys are eating meat-centric diets, living the life, fat rats.
Going to the pub.
Boom.
After the game.
Ronaldoing out there. And from that standpoint, understanding that when you eat with these, keto protocols today that are recommending 75% fat intake, from meat, you're also tripling your cholesterol intake.
But does that not to
go ahead.
Talk negatively on keto, or does it necessarily say from meat?
It doesn't say from meat.
Okay.
They say 75%
but
fat
people
intake.
Interpret
but the
that.
programs people are subscribing to are saying
Gotcha.
Get it from meat. Keto is completely sustainable from a plant-based perspective when you understand how to get that nutrient intake from its original source. Everybody's seen What the Health already. Everybody's seen Forks Over Knives and all those other documentaries that are highlighting the truth about nutrition today. But all protein begins in plant form. There's no need to source it from a secondary source outside of the outdated thought that we hold protein longer in a secondary, form. The body doesn't need to hold protein, beyond its natural course of maybe 2 to 3 hours. Today, with the super processed, foods we're eating, we're consuming gluten that doesn't break down in the gut for 8 to 12 hours, whereas the original wheat, einkorn wheat, broke down in the digestive tract in 10 to 12 minutes. When you eat seeded grains like amaranth or farro, which is a natural form of gluten, hybrid version of einkorn wheat, or quinoa, those things break down really fast in the GI tract so that they release the nutrients and that the body needs to continue to replace what it's using. Here's the other thing many people don't understand, too, when they talk nutrient density. The body contains every vitamin and mineral that it needs for your entire lifespan. Supplementation is not necessary outside of proper balanced intake from a food perspective, because what's starting to happen and what's creating hormone nutritional deficiencies in the body is whenever you consume a synthetic nutrient, the body has to take from its mineral stores to complete that incomplete DNA chain of nutrition. So if one molecule is missing from that synthetic, version of rice that you ate, your body has to take a piece of your iron to complete that chain, and so you can utilize what little you can of that. The more you eat like that, the more that problem will continue to explode, as you're not understanding, what you're putting in your mouth is the piece that's causing the physical expression of what's going wrong.
So what do you mean by the body has every vitamin, mineral it needs? Are you saying that when we do without proper supplementation and we eat the foods that we're supposed to eat, we're just kind of reactivating, or are those nutrients that we're taking in are kind of reactivating everything the body already has and exists within the body?
It's reinforcing those stores, yes. When we're, the human creation process is celestial. It's something that we'll never fully understand. The protein between two people can combine to then create another. The same way you plant a seed in the ground, it grows some fruit. But through that process of creation, you just had a blessing. Your little one just took half of your wife's vitamin, mineral, hormone stores to develop, which is where a lot of the adverse situations that women go through postpartum come from, is the inability to understand how to replace that vitamin mineral deficiency that happens from pregnancy. And that's where we see a lot of women struggle postpartum. And I'm not going to go into all the diagnosis because I don't want to speak to that stuff. In understanding that the natural life cycle allows us to create and share those minerals during the gestational process, that's where that sharing happens between mother and child. When baby is born, they take those things with them. But that's also what demonstrates the importance today and the re-emphasis of breastfeeding, because during the first 6 months of life, the human body's microbiome, which is the bacterial composition of your gut, is wide open in an infant, meaning it's supposed to be receiving all of its nutrients from mom. We're not baby cows. We should not be drinking cow's milk. Human beings need breast milk for development. I have a 16-month-old at home who's still on the breast, which many women, when they hear that from my wife, are like, damn, how the hell are you doing that? Like, you work full time too. You're not a stay at home. And it's because that's what's supposed to happen. I mean, we made the adjustments to ensure that, she could do that properly. And thankfully she has an employer that's, goes above and beyond in that regard. As my wife works at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, they provide pods, as they're called, to nursing mothers to take breaks during the day to do what they have to do in that regard, so that their at-home process is not interrupted in a way that's detrimental to their values of raising a healthy family. And seeing the difference in my two kids, I have a 5-year-old at home as well, who in that sense, when we were in Florida before coming home, my wife only had 3 months at home before she had to go back to work. And from that standpoint, I was working full time for the government. We were supplementing formula. And that supplementation is what I now believe caused the issues that my daughter had when we moved back home when she was around 2, 3. One of the most common procedures at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia today within peds is tonsil adenoidectomies, which is the removal of the tonsils and the adenoids and the replacement in the ears of tubes that help drain the inflammation that's being caused in the digestive tract, in the respiratory tract of infants because of their overconsumption of dairy and dairy products. I mean, formulas are dairy-based in a sense, in addition to the other chemicals, vitamins, minerals that are in that. And you can market formula all you want as close to breast milk, but it's not, because it doesn't have all of the complete nutrition that child needs to develop fully, which is what's also sparking the obesity rates in this country, because we are giving our kids all the wrong shit too soon, too fast. That kind of matriculates into the anti-vaxxer conversations and things like that too. I do not believe, from a scientific standpoint, that vaccinations cause autism. I do believe 100% in looking at how much money the government is paying out in vaccination injuries every year, trillions of dollars, that the acceleration of our vaccination schedules, giving kids 2, 3, 4 vaccinations in the same sitting,
in combination with each other,
in combination, is creating these cocktails that are destroying the microbiome of these kids, that leave them susceptible to further cellular deformation. Childhood leukemias are on a rise, in addition to other autoimmune caused conditions because of our misunderstanding from a medical and a nutritional standpoint what the body can handle. I agree we need to be preventing from some of these diseases that we've now gotten ahead of from an advancement in technology and access to medicine. But I also believe that the parents that are choosing not to do these things aren't wrong, because you can fortify the body nutritionally, understanding the full spectrum of where to get, what you need. But from an American societal perspective, we've been so programmed over the last 40 years through business models that don't serve us, healthcare, agriculture, pharma, insurance, they're all connected, that are leading us in the wrong direction and encouraging our dependence versus our independence. I mean, I put up a post the other day on my Instagram that highlighted the truth. Grandma survived the Great Depression because her supply chain for food was local and she knew how to do shit.
I saw that. So basically saying like promoting local farming or even having that little garden in your backyard, which is
one of the biggest things that we don't understand as Americans, is that we need to be eating local to prevent the adulteration of food processed through transportation. I mean, you gotta throw something on those tomatoes in California so that they can survive the 7-day truck ride here to PA to make sure that they're fresh. Whereas if you had, some tomatoes growing out back and the DNA of that food because you raised it, you're not going to have to worry about the threats of what may be in that. From that standpoint, too, it takes us back to, again, just understanding that the food we're eating today is not the food of 10 years ago. That's why we're seeing an explosion so young of autoimmune disorders happening.
Well, how has it varied even just from 10 years, would you say?
I mean, let's look at the truth.
Because that doesn't seem like too long of a time.
Correct.
2019, 2009.
We allowed the largest pharmaceutical company in the world to purchase the largest agricultural company in the United States. Bayer, aspirin, German company, owns Monsanto. That sale was allowed by current administration, and I think is one of the biggest detriment to the American society as a whole, because we have a pharma company producing our food now who, I mean, we've seen time and time again the detriment that company is causing. The big lawsuit they just paid out, from a worker that was using one of their, premier products to do what it's supposed to do, has, some of the worst form of cancers on the planet because of his overexposure to that synthetic substance. And the fact that we're now seeing glyphosate, the main ingredient in Roundup, in our kids' first foods, Cheerios, all General Mills cereals, because they're mass produced by Monsanto-owned subsidiaries, is the bigger cause to, again, our obesity rates, the explosion of autoimmune, and just a whole host of nutritionally based medical diagnoses that are completely unnecessary, that aren't happening in underdeveloped countries, at the rate that we're seeing it. The most powerful company the largest economy in the world, that's about to be overtaken by China. That's another convo though. And we're falling behind in every category that we used to lead 10, 20 years ago. I mean, in looking at education in this country in the 70s, we were number one across the board. Today we're 25th in math, and I think we might be like 30th in science.
That's a shame.
The best doctors in the world are coming from abroad. Where are they studying? Right here in the United States. Then they're leaving to take these advancements back home because, we still have great educational resources if you can pay for them. But, the mass as a whole is being driven deeper and deeper, into government dependence and just dependence as a whole on systems that aren't actually serving our core values.
So just going back real quick to that Bayer acquisition, I guess I have that conspiracy theorist in me. I wouldn't put it past
Same.
a company like Bayer to literally, now that they made that acquisition, controlling a big portion of the food that we eat and the food that is, being grown for us, you start seeing these little things pop up in food, and then all of a sudden there's these little pill solutions that are also starting to then be produced. Is that so far out of the sketch? Is that
Not
what
at all, bro. I mean, the thing that I'm saying to most people off the bat in that regard is the German government could kill us in 6 months if they wanted to. I mean, why are we outsourcing our needs to other nations that don't have the same values we do? I mean, I'm an American through and through, but at the same time, I'm learning, outside of these borders from global perspective, global experience. The rest of 90% of American food production is banned globally. When you go to the UK, you don't have the worry. Now, you have some of the same because they use some of our technology advancements in their food production, but they don't allow the synthetic adulteration that we do at the levels we do. It might be 50% less, in the UK versus here. But there you have clear labeling, so you can read your ingredients and understand that there aren't hidden things in your food that might be detrimental. In the United States today, citric acid on a mass production, well, citric acid comes from citrus fruits. But in food production today, when you see citric acid on an ingredient label, you don't know if that's coming from citrus or it's coming from black mold, because black mold produces citric acid as well. We know that mold should not be inside of the body, but yet we're using mold to produce things that we can use nutritionally synthetically. And you don't have clear understanding of the DNA of what you're consuming. I can point to about 50 examples in my timeline of people that, are heading in the wrong direction. Some woke up, went back in the right direction, and are understanding how to better utilize the resources they have around them to become more balanced in their consumption because they control more of it. And that's the piece that is helping me undo a lot of the bad programming that's been passed down generationally and change the landscape of what my family's future will look like, because I don't want to leave too soon. I mean, we all have our time.
I think anybody does, right?
Right. But some of us don't understand how we're contributing to that, in a real way, subconsciously, and just kind of, on autopilot.
Or just accepting it as this is how it is and this is how it always been, or,
right.
This is just life. Real quick to go back, do you think that all of this, since the 70s, now we're 25th in education as it relates to math or whatever number as it relates to science, and now we're outsourcing our food production to Germany. At the core of all this, is this all money? Is that what this all comes down to, business and money?
Absolutely. I mean, 100%. Why are we sending U.S.-produced chicken to China to be processed and then sent back to the American people to consume? I mean...
Does that happen? Is that with major brands?
100%. I mean, I'm not going to say Purdue is doing that, but Tyson Chicken absolutely does that. They grow the chicken here, they send it, they outsource it to China to process. You don't know what's being pumped into that food.
Wow.
Before it comes.
So sending a chicken, I'm assuming this is the answer, but sending chickens to China can be processed more inexpensively
Mm-hmm.
than it can be done here. So even the cost with shipping that to China and everything.
Think about it like this: China owns 3/4 of U.S. debt. I was working for the United States Postal Service in a cross-agency partnership with the Department of State. I was overseeing passport processing for the post office in Orlando. To mail a 2-ounce package, first-class international mail to China, was $27.80. To mail that same item, to mail something 4 times bigger than that, 8 ounces from China here, costs 4 cents. Why? Those are concessions that we're having to make to those that own our debt, or those that we, have borrowed from in some capacity, received some assistance from in some capacity. That's how we're paying that back. If China called in our debt tomorrow, the U.S. would be thrown into third world country status, because we wouldn't be able to pay that back. We'd have to give even more concession. I've seen some business projections saying that if China wanted to call in the debt tomorrow, they can punch a hole out of the middle of the United States to take over Kansas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, and whole states to essentially, remedy that situation. But I mean, Hershey chocolate being produced in Mexico. I mean, that was an American company.
Hershey, PA?
Hershey, PA, right here in our backyard. We go to the park still. All that shit is being produced, again, Mexico now. Carrier, air conditioning, heating, air conditioning, just closed a whole bunch of plants because of, what the current tax model is doing to businesses now. Even after the massive break that the American people just funded to support, that business. GM just closed a bunch of plants, after previous administration saved the auto industry and helped support more American jobs, growth. And I don't want to get into the back and forth and the comparisons between the two because that piece is irrelevant. We as American people need to take more responsibility for, our consumption, what we consume, and understanding the long-term effects of these things. Because the more we leave that information or that responsibility and remain dependent on someone else's recommendation, the more we can be manipulated in ways that we wouldn't desire and agree to and sign on the dotted line for,
Right.
with the right information in front of us.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because, as we said in the beginning of the show, we were just everyday guys eating the same old type of shit that I'm sure most Americans eat, which even if you feel like you're eating a balanced diet, I gave the example of a steak, mashed potatoes, maybe you have a vegetable, and then on the weekends you're ordering pizza or you're eating junk food. How does a person, just a regular person, educate themselves to the level that you did? Now, we have a lot of resources out now that we didn't have when we were younger, so it makes it a lot easier.
I'm not a doctor,
Right, but what steps did you take to educate yourself?
I started surrounding myself with more like-minded people I saw out in the world that I'm connected to who were moving in this direction or making attempts to. So in the beginning, I have a cousin that's on an Herbalife, $1 million producing team. And so I went that route, tried that out. Saw some results, but also saw some adverse quickly after stopped doing that. That was my first introduction to synthetic supplementation. And from that standpoint, I'm not here to trash, a program that we already know is not the best for us. But especially looking at their deceptive business practices over the course of, how many times they've been hit internationally for improper sourcing practices. Side note, I own 10 acres in Jamaica. When I leave the Montego Bay Airport and head east, you drive right past an Herbalife processing plant before you get into Runaway Bay, which is where my property is located. And it chaps the ass every time. It's like, how did a country that's so in tune with proper, intake and synthetic elimination allow such a company to come do business on their land? Money. Because, again, Jamaica is still being third world economically. I call them first world because of, the heart of the people, the culture, and the history. But they're susceptible to, dilution of their values because they're dependent on the almighty dollar. When you look at the Jamaican economy, one U.S. dollar is 125 Jamaican dollars. So, when you see that wide of a gap between valuations.
And you know that you could set your family for life. And I think that's at the root what happens with all people. Mm-hmm. The root of what happened to America as it's grown today, mm-hmm. Or just anything. It gets the better of people and have one lifestyle, and all of a sudden, if you know that you think you're doing better or you can do better by your family, by the almighty dollar, I mean, you can't really fault people for taking that chance. It's a fine line. It's hard.
Absolutely,
it's difficult.
It demonstrates the double-edged sword that is capitalism, that is consumerism, and that's the piece that we, because of our gross access, take full advantage of. Anyone that is of sound mind, body, spirit, that steps outside of these borders gets a different perspective. You get more of a global view that in most times dispels a lot of the propaganda that has been, drilled into your head about the way the rest of the world lives, operates. When you step outside of these borders, you really see, too, the global perspective of how people view us outside looking in. And, the way that that's transpired over time through the fact that the U.S. government has been at war 230 of our 260 some years of existence, that demonstrates, the machine that we've developed here through the need to break away from dictatorships, But yet we've become one.
We've become one.
The global one. And,
right.
You know,
but we paint a different picture here.
Oh, no shit.
Through media.
Oh, come on. I mean, you know, fake news. It's all fake news. And,
right.
And in reality, the machine is controlling what's being pumped out through that. I mean, we saw the Nielsen expose a couple months ago where, you know, 80 channels were running the same propaganda at the same time in the same communities, depending on the racial demographic of those communities. And even, I mean, they were running them here in Philadelphia too, but with a slightly different spin, depending on who owned the company, where their political dollars were rooted, was the message that was being disseminated. And I firmly believe that's why we're in the mess we're in politically right now, is because we allowed a system of checks and balances to become unbalanced and allowed the wrong influences, you know, to set the standard for the American people. You know, the loser. We're mid-30s. This is the second time in my existence where I've seen money steal an election from a winner.
Even going back to
my first election with Bush Gore. Money. His brother happened to be the governor of the state they forced a recall in. That changed the entire landscape of that election. And in this one, this dude did not think for 1 second he was going to become the fucking president of the United States.
Nobody
He
did.
was using this shit as a stepping stone to do whatever was next for him. And once getting into the role, we now see how he's done. And we now see what draining the swamp really meant. It meant draining the people out of the way that were allowing, you know, causing the resistance to, you know, his capitalistic desires. And the gross overuse of the office of the president of the United States that we've seen is unlike anything that this lifetime of people has seen. I mean, we've impeached presidents for less. I mean, like, come on, bro. Like, my man just had some fun, and we had a whole 2 years of address and a stain, and we paid for all that shit. In the end, he wasn't removed from office, but he was still technically impeached. But again, you know, seeing how economically we're now tanking as a nation, you know, because of our choices or lack thereof politically, and seeing how, you know, again, how dependent we are nutritionally. We need to wake up. We need to wake up and really do more to regain our independence as Americans.
Well, going back on that, I mean, what can people do for themselves, the American people, to start eating the way they should be eating? I mean, step one seems to be pretty obvious. You can do a home-based garden or a community garden, something of that nature.
Right.
It seems pretty simple. You know what I mean? Like, what other measures do you think people should be taking to get started?
Well, back again for me, it was really surrounding myself with like-minded people who were moving in this direction to, you know, build with, learn from their mistakes, and also understand how I can incorporate some of the pieces that, you know, I desired more on. But natural organic farming, you know, is definitely one that we can start. There's a bunch of, you know, ready-made products to help you better understand, you know, how to produce what you need right in your yard. Now, granted, I mean, space becomes an issue when you're talking about full spectrum of nutrition. But in understanding that we need to be eating seasonally, is where one can better start to focus.
Meaning eating fruits and vegetables that are in season.
Grown in your area in that time of the year. So to focus on, you know, something that many of us suffer from when we don't understand how to get complete seasonal nutrient density is a lot of us are experiencing the winter blues these days. Why? Because we're still eating strawberries, blueberries, fruits that are grown, you know, in typical times of the year out of season, and you're not getting enough of the root vegetables that are grown during the winter months that will help your body sustain the lack of sunlight that we're getting.
So they may have more vitamin D or things of that nature. So it's nature's way of literally providing you with everything you need.
Correct.
Throughout the year.
So let me ask you this question, Boot. Why do you eat?
Because I'm hungry. Because, you know, that's the honest answer, what most people will say. I think it's just because you're hungry, because food tastes good, because you're bored. Mm-hmm. And usually last on the list for maybe myself included is probably what it should be, which is nutrition.
Great answers that come from, again, the standard American understanding of what food is. Do you understand that your body is an electrical vehicle?
Never looked at it that way.
Do you understand, well, what grows the food that you eat?
Sunlight, water.
Boom. 2/3 of why we eat is to recharge the electrical battery in the body with nutrients absorbed from the sun. Food, life cannot exist without sunlight. 2/3 of our intake should be electrical to better support and foster the machine that we are. And it's that understanding was given to me by a good friend and mentor of mine who is a naturopath physician. Helped me see the light on. And that is why I'm huge today about eat local, eat seasonal, eat organic, and support the small guy, because, you know, Wegmans, they're in a great place. The family is loaded, and they don't even think about, you know, what's happening in their stores every day, because it's become turnkey. Look at the Walton family, Walmart. Look at Costco. I mean, all of these people are products of business engines that, you know, were successful. Amazon. I mean, he's the richest person in the world started in a garage, you know, selling books. And then he basically backdoored every other industry out there to incorporate, you know, into this massive supply chain that we now all have apps on and pay the $99 going up to $129 this year for Prime to have shit at the house 2-day, overnight, whatever you need. It's that instant gratification that has been programmed into society that's leading us the wrong way. So back to, you know, what can you do? It's again, you know, start doing some research, some real homework outside of business models that are going to steer you away or misinform you about, you know, what's really going on and what's really vital in regard to the things that resonate with you.
Any resources in particular that you like? Because you've done a good job of educating yourself on your own. Mm-hmm. And part of the conversation that we had is how much of a shame it is that, you know, our nutrition within hospitals, doctors, medicine in particular, you know, don't really preach a lot of this. You know, a lot of this information, whether you listen to other podcasts or you go to websites or resources, you know, it's people kind of conducting their own research, much like you did. And I don't know if you have any good resources out there that people should check out or that can be helpful for someone getting started like this.
I use the same resources that our doctors do. PubMed. PubMed is the National Library of Medicine, or NIH. The same entities that your doctors are building with for research and breakthroughs. I use their same databases. So anyone that knows me personally has been seeing over the last 3 years that I do business with a company by the name of doTERRA. doTERRA is the largest essential oil producer in the world because they do business in 50 countries globally, but their number one selling product are their plant-based vitamins. A lot of and these vitamins are formulated by doctors. They're not just, you know, these smart nutrition companies that are taking these studies and formulating the ingredients that these studies are saying are healthful without any actual verification, research to back that. Which is why doTERRA is different in that regard, because they're the only health and wellness company with clinical integration. You can buy your oils from whoever you want, but just know that you're buying an adulterated, subpar product if you aren't buying anything direct from the producer itself. You know, we had less problems from an inflammation standpoint when we were buying our meats from our butcher. You know, when you had a local guy in the community that was going out to Lancaster, buying the cow, killing it, and giving you what you needed versus these mass production entities. So from that standpoint, I'm using the same, data that our clinicians are using to educate myself on what I need to be avoiding. So PubMed is a great resource. There's a ton of books out there today. Modern Essentials is one that, and from that standpoint, a lot of these are geared toward volatile aromatic compounds or the immune system of plants, which, in short, is the definition of what is an essential oil. An essential oil is the scent of a flower that protects that plant in nature from environmental threats that are trying to kill it. So the scent of a rose is protecting, that flower from, I guess the deer that might, come try to eat it. That's why it has thorns on it. The smell of orange juice is housed in the orange rind. When you express that oil through cold press technology, you're releasing the immune system of that plant. When you use citrus sinensis or wild orange essential oil internally, that oil helps to naturally turn off the fight or flight mechanism in the brain that causes acute anxiety all the way to full-blown PTSD. The government is aware of this. Why doesn't the VA have this in their arsenal to support the number one cohort suffering from the extreme diagnosis in that condition? And the list goes on. I mean, I've got blends for respiratory support, digestive, immune support, and inflammation support. And then when you take those blends apart and understand the single oil constituencies or the immune system of each of those plants and how the different combinations that can be created can offset adverse, health conditions without adverse reaction, that's the direction you want to be going. A path of least resistance to the end goal is what we all should be, sourcing. So some books that I've read are the Modern Essentials. I think the 10th edition is out now, and that helps better understand single essential oil constituencies and the way that they work in the body to help offset different things that are going wrong. The Essential Life is another book by Total Wellness Publishing. It outlines, in the 6th edition, it compliantly outlines every single oil, essential oil, vitamin supplement, synthetic free hygiene product that the company produces to help you understand how to, again, reduce your synthetic adulteration, decrease toxic load, and thrive. Because toxic load in the body is the piece that contributes to health deterioration. And these are simple, accessible things that you can get on Amazon from your library that can help you start down the path of, again, regaining that independence from a personal standpoint, and also using, clinical resources to kind of vet that information against. When you look in PubMed right now, you'll find 20,000 clinical studies on peppermint essential oil alone. You'll also find doTERRA's On Guard Protective Blend. If you're looking on the PubMed site, search Protective Blend of Essential Oil, and it'll lead you to the top clinical study of On Guard Protective Blend clinically attenuates the influenza virus naturally, meaning that $32 bottle of essential oil that contains wild orange, cinnamon bark, clove bud, eucalyptus, rosemary stops the influenza virus inside of the body better than any flu shot ever could, any of the synthetic hybrid antibiotics that they're throwing at the flu today when you present and are diagnosed with it for $32. And you've got 250 doses of that solution that, when you're not worried about the flu, naturally aids the body in forming a natural barrier protection against microbial, which is bacteria, and viral composition bugs.
So getting this information, from the variety of sources that you have, but saying it's really accessible through PubMed, just like doctors can get this information. Why have doctors in medicine not put this stuff in practice?
They can't sell it through the model of business they operate. Every doctor takes, the Hippocratic Oath, which is supposed to demonstrate, patient over anything else, and how that clinician intends to operate, within the system. But once the rude awakening of actually coming out of your residency and getting into business and having your first job as a doctor hit you in the face, you realize very quickly, and this varies clinician to clinician. I'm not throwing every doctor into the machine.
This is just general overall practice.
Correct. And what exposed it to me was my time at Temple, where I had the desire to, after tearing my knee, fourth game senior year, to go into physical therapy. And they had a great DPT program, doctorate in physical therapy program, that had launched there at the time. And first year in was educated on what employer protocol is. As a clinician, if your employer doesn't risk mitigate a recommendation for diagnosis, you are prohibited to give it. So that's why you can't go to your ophthalmologist and complain about your foot fungus and have him prescribe you Lotrimin AF, which is an over-the-counter, antifungal, because that doctor is more worried about a lawsuit
getting sued
than giving you the solution that you need. And to me, that's bonkers, because that's not the way that medicine is taught globally. Clinicians abroad are taught holistically about the total body. And the closest example I think that we have here in U.S. medicine is doctors of osteopaths who again treat the whole body, but also have, the understanding of the specialties as well, depending on where they end or fall, in their practice. And from that standpoint, focusing a doctor on a specialty is going to have them eliminate all the other systems in the body that need to be working in harmony, balance, homeostasis to induce, a positive result. And from that standpoint, it's, again, that's the biggest thing, dependence on a business model that is leading us off track in so many areas of life, health, relationship. I mean, you name it. And we need to tighten up. We need to wake up. We need to, again, take control of the things that are, harming us most unknowingly.
Well, isn't it interesting, too, that if you look at some of the top athletes or movie stars, famous people, whoever, to your point about medicine being practiced globally, when they need certain types of treatment, whether it's, a hip replacement or something wrong with their knee, and they're going to another country to get certain types of stem cells that might not be allowed here.
Kobe's a great example with, the injury he had in the ankle and the quad, where he went, to Germany, he went to France for stem cell infusions. Stem cells are the rebuilding blocks of our DNA. I mean, you and I had talked about this, with your
baby.
The baby, in how we can preserve those things today for future diagnoses. I mean, we did stem cell preservation with cryo freezing the placenta, because that's one of the warnings they give you when you're understanding, birthing practices naturally, is to not cut the cord too soon. Allow that flow of blood and nutrients to make its way to the child versus, getting the baby out, cutting it, and starting the aftercare process too soon. That's not, how we followed either of our birthing practices. We did skin to skin immediately. You did not cut that cord until the pulsation stopped, and we even, kind of fed it, from mother into child to ensure that everything that needed to go got there. And then we did the preservation practices and still had plenty of stem cells remaining in that placenta to, store for future use. And I mean, some of the things that you can help offset later on in life with stem cell preservation, leukemia, multiple sclerosis, muscular dystrophy, just to name some of the big ones, that can help offset these things. Could that be used, not to cut you off, but could that be used for something like you're an athlete? Could that particular, stem cell from the baby placenta be used for a knee? Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that Olympic doping, is like Lance Armstrong. He was using a technique that basically, at the height of his training, he would be up in the Swiss Alps, running 20 miles a day. He would take blood out of his body and preserve that for later, and on race day, inject that blood back into him, because he was pulling his stem cells out at the height of their production through his cold conditioning that he was doing for the event, that gives him better stamina through these long races. And that's where, the majority of his Tour de France's were invalidated, because of his natural process of adulterating his body for better performance. And that's kind of where actually, I'm not even going to mention that, because that'll get us off topic. But from that standpoint, yeah, it's
the point of this is, too, these famous people, again, seem to have access to these doctors who have the knowledge and are willing to try. Now, I don't know if they sign some type of consent form. I'm sure they probably do.
They have to.
But it's like they have this knowledge, and only the people who are like these elite performance athletes or actors who are in these high positions that are willing to, quote unquote, take a risk, even though, to us or people with knowledge, it really doesn't seem that risky at all. Mm-hmm. They're the ones that seem to be on the cutting edge, because Lance Armstrong was doing this years ago.
Let's look at another example. Sure, all of you have seen the meme that went around right before Christmas, I believe, of Magic Johnson donating blood.
No way. I didn't say it.
Google it. There'll be a picture of Magic Johnson donating blood very recently to help blood banks in L.A. I mean, what do we know about
Everybody's
Magic
probably
Johnson?
shitting their pants. That's the joke of it.
Exactly. And what many don't know is that Magic Johnson, at the height of his diagnosis, had reached out to a alternative doctor who was operating in Central America, who in the late 80s, he posted an ad in the New York Times that basically said, if you have one of 80 diseases on the list that he posted in the paper, of which cancers were on there, HIV, AIDS, all of that, he was making a claim that he could cure these diseases naturally. And he was sued by the federal government, and he won. And this is who you see people referencing now today posthumously, Dr. Sebi, who was a self-taught pathologist, blood analyzer, doctor. And I mean, he had so many designations outside of being, an engineer and everything else, that he started these fasting camps in Honduras, where for like $1,500 you can come spend 7 days at his camp. And you would go through a toxin elimination protocol that included a fasting protocol, because fasting is the only natural mechanism of detox that the body can use without adverse reaction or adverse effect. It has to be done properly, and it's a very specific step of events that you can utilize to naturally induce the body's total obliteration of the synthetic stores in the body, which cause, that imbalance or deficiency in some area that's presenting disease. And in addition to that, he was using, in addition to fasting, a mucusless diet, understanding anti-inflammatory foods and things that work with the body's electrical current to induce alkalinity, health. We know today, baseline, that nothing adverse from a disease standpoint can survive in an alkaline environment. Your gut is an acidic environment because its natural resting pH is anywhere between 5 and 4. Can get all the way down to 1.0 pH, depending on the type of food you're eating. But why the American obesity rate is such a problem right now is because the average American is walking around with a bacterial composition in the gut of 60 to 70 bad to 40 to 30 good, where from a proper GI standpoint, we should all be in the 85% good to 15% bad to be processing our food properly and have all the systems in the body working in harmony. And we're starting to kill our kids' microbiome at 2 and 3 because the microbiome in a child forms by age, I believe, 3-4 medically. And that will dictate how that child, adjust to the environment around them. Whether you have a sickly kid or where you have a kid that doesn't get sick often depends on how well you laid the foundation for that child's, overall health throughout his lifetime. Because as I mentioned at the very beginning of this, 90% of our immune system is housed in our gut. Life begins in the gut because that's the powerhouse of everything else. It's the boiler room. Medicine today is now starting to clinically validate the brain-heart-gut connection. They're calling the gut the second brain, when in my mind, it's really the first brain, because that's the piece that tells the actual brain, what to do, where to go. Like when no matter how good you're eating, when you start to transition away from secondary proteins, as I'll call them, because meat is not bad for us. We can receive nutrition for it, but the overconsumption from an American standpoint is the piece that's driving.
And the way it's processed, the way we get it,
it's
all those angles that make it what it is, or in a negative fashion.
Correct. But, from that standpoint and understanding that elimination of those foods is what's going to help, produce the desired health improvement is the piece we need to focus more on. And, from that secondary protein consumption, you have to make the active choice. You have to go do your homework. Understanding that my essential oils have 1,000 times less adverse reaction than the food that you're eating every day, is the piece that helps me understand that I'm moving in the right direction. because I'm seeing the improvement and in the growing community around me that's now tired of the revolving door that is healthcare and the lack of solutions they're finding, having to take more prescription pills to offset the first ones they started. The average American
cost.
I mean, bro, we're being broken right now because of our healthcare costs. The average American is spending $10,000 a person per year under healthcare protocols, and from that standpoint, the average American on prescription medications today is around 8 prescriptions. It's kind of funny that antibiotic resistance has the same statistic of 8 antibiotics by the 3rd birthday, which is creating that resistance later on. But the average American on health protocols are in the same range. My dad right now, type 2 diabetic, stage 5 renal failure, kidney disease. There is no stage 6. He's taking 7 prescription pills a day for his high blood pressure and a couple other things, and 3 vitamins prescribed by his doctor. My dad will take the medically prescribed vitamins, which are completely synthetic, and overdosing him every day. He's on 8,000 IUs of calcium, which is 10 times the daily intake. We only need 800 IUs for proper, calcium balance. He's taking 10 times that because his doctor knows that his body can only use 10 to 20% of that to get what it needs. So he has to overdose him on it. And that's the piece that will throw other things off in the body when you don't understand what's happening. I got a friend of mine right now that I'm meeting with on Tuesday because she's pregnant. Will be, I think the baby's due in either March or May. But that aside, she's anemic. And her doctor has now put her on a prescription iron supplement. And what she doesn't understand yet, because I haven't given her this information, is synthetic iron is going to actually break down, the enamel in your teeth and start to deteriorate the muscles around your heart, because dentists know, especially holistic dentists, that our teeth are a direct reflection of our heart health. Our mouth demonstrates, how our heart is doing because the teeth come from the heart. I don't know how.
You don't know but
right. But if you ask a dentist, they'll say, yeah, that's right. and they'll take that. I'll take that a step further. In a really good friend of mine, I won't shout her name out because I didn't tell her I was doing this, but she one of my mentors in doTERRA. I'm actually on her team. She had a really interesting experience a couple months back, in that I got a random call out of the blue from, a past boyfriend who had did her really wrong at the time. This was almost 20 years ago. He had expressed, everything that he hadn't said in 20 years, and it was kind of wild because right after this call, she decides to make a visit with her holistic dentist in Florida. She goes to visit this dentist, and after doing x-rays and an exam, he's looking at the x-rays, and he's noticing that she has these massive holes where the wisdom teeth were in her jawline that had never healed. And the first question he asked her was, who broke your heart 20 years ago? She started crying, at the question.
No.
Bro, who's going to make this shit up?
Really?
She started crying at the question because the man she was supposed to marry 20 years ago, dumped her because he was, under the control of a parent that was, super powerful financially and manipulative in how he didn't want his son with this woman. So he kind of just sabotaged the relationship. And the way he did it and the way it played out was kind of crazy. But the doctor had identified that emotional trauma from 20 fucking years ago just by a dental exam, because that's what his training on the human body and our physiology and the way things develop naturally, appear from an adverse perspective. I've had 8 wisdom teeth removed from my head. I don't have a single hole open on my jawline because, I've also had some pretty healthy relationships, throughout, my growth. And from that perspective, that blew my mind. And to the tune, I had that doubt in my head too, because I always have to vet shit that people are talking about before I start, passing it off as information you can use. I scheduled a a visit with Philadelphia's top holistic dentist, a doctor by the name of Dr. Regney. And ironically, he is right across the street from Santucci's Pizza on 10th and Christian. Best square pie in the city. They're a sleeper on my my Uber recommendations list of best cheesesteaks in the city because they, and not to give them a plug, but when I was eating meat, if I wanted a really good cheesesteak, I would go to Santucci's because they do garlic bread cheesesteaks. Garlic bread chicken cheesesteaks. So,
Damn.
I mean, those of you that are, trying to improve, please disregard that. But those of you still killing yourselves, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Enjoy, because it's delicious.
It's a good way to go out.
But yeah, he's right across the street from Santucci's at 10th and Christian. And when I had my exam with him, he did some really interesting things too. He had this little box. It almost looked like a tiny pencil case that had little sections off for these vials that contained fluid and what looked like a rock of some sort. But what he's saying, what that was, I don't know the actual title of the mechanism, but it was filled with all 102 minerals that the body utilizes and needs to function properly on a daily basis.
And this is a dentist.
This is a dentist, a holistic dentist. He practices modern dentistry on those that need that, but
Sure.
in those that want the synthetic free options, he utilizes that as well. But he walks in after my cleaning and the exam, and he throws this box of minerals on my lap, and he gives me some instructions. He had me hold my right arm out, and you know how when you go see an orthopedist, they want to test your strength. So
Sure.
he was trying to push my arm down. And he did it to the left side. He checked my neck. And from those three things, he said, something, I mean, he understood because we had a conversation about doTERRA briefly and why I was here to see him. And through that eval post dental work, he said that my thyroid and my liver were blocked at the time. And that's the piece that's, causing me to not lose the weight that I was working on losing at the time, because you're having lymphatic and endocrine blockage, through your diet. And at that point,
And you're like, what? You're just looking at my mouth.
and that's what kind of made me, all right, doc, you're kind of blowing my mind with some of the things you're saying, because I already knew the thyroid piece of it, because my mom is hypothyroid. So it makes sense that I would, potentially have some thyroid issues later on down the line.
Right.
But thyroidism is not genetic. Despite medicine's, understanding of the way diseases are passed down, through family lineage. It also made me validate the story that my friend had told me about her recent experience with her holistic dentist. And when I told him that story, he kind of smiled with that, like, shit-eating grin, like, that's a good
Told you so.
That's a good doctor she's got down there, because he's 100% right. And he wanted the doctor's name because that holistic practitioners are very few and far between.
They want to chat it up. Yeah.
Right. And they're always building at conferences, and they tend to know each other because it's hard to find.
They need a little community.
Right. So
Need some people to not degrading them or saying, like, calling bullshit on everything they do.
right, because the way that naturopaths today, doctors who use nature to source solutions for sickness and disease, they had a bad rap 10 years ago because the majority of them were focusing on where medicine can't. Nutrition. They were making herbal supplements, and they were using the body's natural waste removal processes to their patients' advantage. And from that standpoint too, to source your solutions through holistic practitioners is not reachable for everyone, because it's not billable through your insurance. So you got to pay for all of this out of pocket, which most people can't. The way in which we've been, stunted from a financial position here in this country, with the 40-hour work week and, go to school, get a job, work hard, and then you retire. And most of us can't enjoy that, because by that time, we're in a reactive position to things that are now starting to go wrong as we start to slow down. Greatest example I have of that is a carrier of mine in Florida. There's an 85-year-old woman still delivering mail 56 years into her career.
God bless her.
Right. Little Alice.
Little Alice, still getting it done.
Little Alice getting it done. And the thought process amongst those who are like ending their careers and things is that they want to have an active retirement. But in a lot of cases, when you break the routine of, what your life has been, devoted to
for all those years,
is where most people are dropping dead, unexpectedly, because they no longer have the purpose that got them up every day. That it tends to be the case too with couples that are married, 40, 50 years. One dies, the other one dies shortly after, because
it's amazing.
They're dying from a broken heart. They're dying from the thing that got them up every day. So that demonstrates the deeper, the electronic connection that we have to other people, and the environments that we facilitate for ourselves. And from that standpoint, you really need to look deeper, past the skin deep, understanding that most of us have about how we operate today. And if, more life is what you desire, then start moving in the directions that will serve you and those you love better, so that you can help switch the mentality of most Americans from reactive to proactive. A financial mentor of mine, he asked me a question that was puzzling the first time I heard it, in my direction, and I'm gonna ask it to you. What will be your life's greatest expense outside of taxes?
My life's greatest expense outside of taxes.
As an American, we can't avoid taxes, so
right. Well, I would say a mortgage.
Good thought, but. Yeah. Nah, not even close. It's going to be your health, bro. Whether it's the investment of a proactive nature over the course of your lifetime, or you've worked 50 years, you got $2 million saved in the 401, a couple other vehicles behind you, but now you got, colon cancer or whatever else. At diagnosis, the average cancer patient has a $300,000 price tag on their head. And in most cases, if you make it past 3 to 5 years and in a cancer protocol, I got a friend of mine right now who's stage 5 metastatic.
Oh, wow.
And she's been battling this for 10 years. They've spent over $3 million in care through, insurance and other mediums to, get her to the point that she's still here 10 years later with the number one killer, oncology killer of women today. And these are things that are avoidable.
Well, that's interesting, because the other thing I was going to say was time,
right? Which
it kind of correlates with health, obviously.
Absolutely. So, the tangibles we equate to finance, money. Time is the greatest investment we make, through life, wasting it or utilizing it to our advantage. But your health is going to be your greatest life expense, and it's undeniable. That's why, doctors make what they make, and
deservedly so. Well, the other thing I was going to get back to, which was something simple that people could do that you've kind of enlightened me to, was what we do every day, our drinking water. Mm-hmm. And steps that you've taken to make sure that you are drinking clean water, and making sure that, to your point, we talked about the gut bacteria and making sure your gut is obviously healthy. So tell everybody, I guess, what they could do in terms of their drinking water, and what they should be doing, what they should not be doing, what they're probably doing, all that good stuff.
So water is our life force. It's literally 70-80% of your body's composition outside of bone, blood, muscle tissue. And it's what makes everything work in harmony. And just look at the rain cycle. It continues to replenish and recycle, and that's exactly how the body uses it as well. And the biggest misconception that we have from a water consumption standpoint is, one, how much water you should be drinking on a daily basis. Gastroenterologists gut doctors, GI doctors, they use a formula for hydration that makes sense, from a consumption standpoint. When you think about when they use the outdated BMI model to, assess the need. And that formulation is we should be drinking half our body weight in fluid ounces of water daily, but not exceeding 100 fluid ounces in a day. So for the 200-pound person, that's 100 fluid ounces. That would be 3 liters of water. Many of us consume more than that, to be honest. And that's where that's where the misunderstanding of the type of water I drink is coupled into that medical misinformation. Meaning, anytime you drink more than that ratio, your body is actually going to start, losing its mineral and vitamin stores because you are
paying it out.
Correct. You're overhydrating and not allowing the body to absorb your intake. So that's going to have long-term adverse effects. Anybody that knows me before my most recent fasting protocol will say that I'm an alkaline water nut. I believe in the healing benefits of natural alkaline water. So I'm not talking about, core water from Wawa or Smart Water or Essentia water that is being promoted heavily, within athletic circles right now because of its ability to reduce inflammation, speed recovery, things like that. All those things are true about natural alkaline water, but here's the misinformation there. You can't manipulate nature's processes synthetically, and that's what these companies who are marketing these products are doing. A natural version of alkaline water that I still consume today is Wakia. They are a certified green production company out of Hawaii that pulls from an aquifer that produces 4 billion gallons of water a day because it's pulling the water from the ocean through the volcanic rock that is Hawaii into the...
So a natural filtration process.
Correct.
How amazing.
Right. And that's the piece that has that water containing the natural magnesium, phosphorus, sodium bicarbonate, baking soda, the two entities combined, but they appear naturally in alkaline water to help the body replace, minerals that it's losing through the natural process, of our consumption and digestion and elimination. But the water we should be drinking, all of us, if you can make one switch today to improve your health situation, switch your water consumption to distilled water.
There you go. How would somebody do that?
Right. So, it's simple. Every grocery store you shop in has a water aisle. On the bottom shelf, you're going to find bottles of distilled water.
And that's perfectly fine.
Perfectly safe to drink. Why? Well, and I'll explain why in a second. What may deter people when they see it is Poland Spring, for instance. Their distilled water has a red warning on the front that says, for medical device use, small appliance use only. The piece that's going to deter people for medical use. I can't drink that.
Yeah, that looks like, okay, I'm not drinking that shit. Hey.
Not understanding, again, something I said a little earlier, your body is an electrical machine. It is a small appliance. So, we've become, I don't want to deviate too far with this next point, but even with how we eat, when I go to Jamaica, I knowingly eat oxtail. I knowingly eat chicken neck, chicken thighs, chicken legs. We don't eat hot dogs there because what the fuck is a hot dog?
Bunch of processed shit thrown together with fillers.
And I'm not eating meat, there now. But when I've owned this land in Jamaica for 18 years. So, I've been going a lot, over the course of that time. And abroad, we're not ignorant to what we're eating. You know that you're eating a part of an animal. But here, what's a chicken nugget?
Who the hell knows?
Right. What's a chicken tender?
Right.
And we can keep going down that line. What's a pork rind?
Toenail or some shit. Who knows?
Right. So, from that standpoint, we've beautified or coded our language to help deceive the population into what they're really doing. So back to the water, though. The reason distilled water is completely safe and acceptable for, human consumption is because we know it's the cleanest water on the planet. You know that. Your doctor is going to confirm that. Anybody that, is nutritionally, educated will confirm that distilled water is the cleanest water on the planet. I have a friend that's a kidney care nurse who says my water that I use is the best on the planet. It's a medically produced distilled water called RO water, and it does remove all the contaminants from tap water. But I don't drink tap water. I don't shower in it. I don't cook with it, because I understand what's in tap water. I mean, we talked before the show started. Philadelphia did a water study, back in the early 2000s that demonstrated outside of the chloramide, which is a synthetic combination of chlorine and ammonia that they use, that's what clouds, tap water when you first, pour a glass from the faucet, and then it clears up. But in addition to the chloramide that's supposed to filter out all the bad stuff, from our water stores, Philadelphia has close to 50, plus pharmaceutical traces in their water supplies that aren't being, filtered out through any of, the processes, Brita filters, Berkey filters that we have. And, again, your protocol, your daily intake is the piece that you need to be more cognizant of to remove the inflammatory factors from that process. But back to distilled water. Distilled water's natural pH is 6.0 to 6.7. That's slightly acidic, slightly below neutral. Why that is healthful to consume is when you drink distilled water, the body, one, doesn't have to digest it because it's already clean. It doesn't have to break down the vitamins, minerals, contaminants that are in that water potentially to utilize it for the body's natural processes, which is detoxification. So that slight acidic state that distilled water is what pulls heavy metal toxin stores from the body on a regular basis. Medicine understands or thinks, because they haven't vetted or proven it, through a clinical study, that distilled water has the potential to pull your vitamin stores as well. False. All vitamins are alkaline. That is what makes fruits, vegetable, on the scale, pH to alkaline. But in understanding the natural processes of photosynthesis, how plants make their food, how they absorb water with sunlight, how they become 2/3 sunlight, is the distillation process that photosynthesis is. When a plant absorbs water, the sun helps distill that water to break down what's in it so it can enter that plant's, cell membranes. And whatever type of plant that is will then, leave the minerals that it produces through its growth process in that water to make it, to change its pH. The minerals are what are alkaline. The water inside of all fruit and vegetable is distilled water. So from that standpoint, if that's what's naturally occurring in the food you're supposed to be eating, the electrical foods that fuel your body, why would you drink anything else? All of us have seen the Facebook, post about when they do pH tests of all bottled waters.
Right.
The
and
majority
different
of
colors.
them, right. The majority of them are on the acidic scale, which is what is actually forcing your body to pull more of the vitamin stores when you overconsume. Drink too much, above your BMI ratio of what you need on a daily basis. So from that standpoint, if you were to start consuming distilled water, your hormone vitamin deficiencies would normalize. You will be dropping the excess weight that you're carrying. You will be eating way less food because you're going to be satiated by what you're eating more of because your body is retaining more of the water it's supposed to be using for its natural processes. The average American is walking around constipated and dehydrated because of our overconsumption of starch-based foods, which are lifeless, in addition to we don't consume enough water. So that's why everything else is breaking down. I mean, the average 30-year-old might be, having a bowel movement once a day. Whereas GI docs say that you should be having a bowel movement with every meal you eat. Let's take that a step further. The average American is consuming 3 meals a day with snacks in between. And they're also not drinking enough water. They're drinking a ton of stimulants. Who doesn't drink coffee today? This is the first time in my coffee consumption period where I haven't had a cup of coffee in the last 6 weeks now, post this fast. Because in resetting a microbiome, in understanding where to get my nutrient density from the foods that I'm eating, and now that I'm drinking the right water, I don't need additional stimulants to make it through my day. I'm eating enough fruits and vegetables to get the
energy
balance
you need.
that I need. I'm working out 3-5 times a week. Anybody that's friends with me on Facebook, sees that I'm up at, I'm a shameless plug, Precision Kettlebells. Great business, great model run by, Delco's Mike Barbado and his wife. They've got a great model going on up there that are helping to demonstrate the natural, balance of fitness is king, nutrition is queen. There is a reason the queen has more power than the king in life, period. Because it's the foundation that everything is built upon. from that standpoint, started a 6-week challenge with my guy in October at 368 pounds. And over the course of, October, November, December, we're now ending January, I'm back down to 311, incorporating fitness in addition to my nutritional understanding, but also the addition of distilled water into that process, because Americans do not understand how much we need to be detoxifying from the foods that we're eating every day. A lot of us have a lot of ignorance about, the misunderstandings we have about other cultures and why they use natural detoxification methods, fasting, and where some of that ignorance is rooted is just fear of the unknown. I mean, a lot of, the folks that
or it's just pure ignorance. Like people, we've done things so long, and our way is always we know better, we're best, or we're first world,
But again,
and we assume.
And even in that assumption, you're afraid of what you don't understand. And there's a reason that 70% of the world's population is Muslim. And there's a reason that those individuals use a fasting protocol 2 times a year. And it's because they understand from a communal standpoint that we need to be
cleansing the body.
Right, cleansing the vessel that, is meant to serve in the way that you live out here in the world. And those that know me personally know that I was raised Catholic. So I have not converted to any other understanding. Still believe in God, but I no longer invest in the business models that are religion. I've learned to be, as spiritual as ever on my own accord, and shun anyone's school of thought of how you reach your higher power. But I just encourage you in any way, shape, or form to really assess the business models that you're subscribing to and eliminate the ones that don't serve.
Well, all you're saying is being open-minded to other people's, beliefs and how they do things, and you'll be surprised.
Absolutely. I mean, the diversity that we have here in this, Northeast corridor is expansive. But, to see the ignorance that still runs, through some of the circles I used to run is depressing, from the sense that, damn, I knew you before. Yeah, I knew you before you got to that point. And you had some great values in regard to, your upbringing. But once you got on your own accord and you stayed the line in regard to...
they still had the same local mentality a lot
right.
of times. I think what we're saying is, like, people don't evolve, or it's a lot of it comes down to being open-minded. And
correct. I mean, just like, I have some family members that never left Philadelphia. I got some friends that will never leave Delco. Mm-hmm. And not that anything's wrong with Delco, despite how much we know is wrong with Delco, but step outside of your borders, man. Broaden your horizons, open your minds, and really understand, learn what you don't know, because mm-hmm. that could be the thing that saves your life. And which is, what's taken me to this point is understanding that I needed to do something different than, what I was subscribing to from, my lineage. And to see just these short changes in a matter of, it's been about 2 years now that I've gone, from that I've adopted a plant-based mindset in regards to my nutrition. Just seeing the way that my family's mindset is starting to change. Yeah, I mean, I'm tearing down the Berlin Wall, bro.
That must be cool, man.
Like, it is, because the one person that got it was not the one that was educating. That was my grandmother, and that's what we talked about earlier. The biggest influence was her mindset in regard to me just paying attention to how she was eating, despite the fact that she was feeding us differently. And in asking her about it, it's a sore point for her, because she now understands where she went wrong, seeing what my dad's going through. And despite her misunderstanding of a couple pieces of what I'm doing, because she's been trained clinically, she's seeing the improvement, and she's like, look, I disagree with certain parts of what you're doing, but outside of that, I'm seeing the improvement that you're having, and I'm also seeing that it's a steady improvement. You're not having these.
She's seeing the overall success.
Right. And
so she knows you're doing something.
Correct. And, her only request now is, get over to your dad's house now.
Yeah.
and say the shit that I can't say to him because, he's just going to brush me off.
And it's hard, man, because you can lead him to water, but you can't make him drink.
Can't. But
that's the difficult part.
Now that my dad can see it, because, I've been talking this for a long time now, but.
And you dropped over 100 pounds.
I've dropped over 100 pounds on this journey. Right. Proof is in the pudding. But recently, I did my last water fast was, I joined a group with a friend of mine from the UK. It was about 50 of us, who committed to doing a 7-day water fast. And to do an extended water fast, you need to understand the preparation, that's involved in the front and back end of this process. So, do your own homework, but understand that if you ever decide to do an extended fast, you need to prepare in advance as many days as you intend to fast through that process. And then you also need to break fast in a very specific way as many days after you've completed
Which is probably
process.
very important that people
Correct.
will, a lot of times with just diets to say, go off them or they have their cheat day, they go bananas.
You eat like an asshole.
And that's not,
and
that's
you
not what you're
ruin
supposed
7
to do.
days worth of progress for 1 day of indulgence. But yes, so a 7-day water fast is a 21-day process. In that 20, because I actually went 11 days.
Wow.
I felt amazing.
So you could still be alive after 11 days of not eating.
Of no food. Yeah. Now water, different story, but you can survive medically close to 56 days without food. I mean, we've seen real life examples of
the Bible, right?
Gandhi, the
40
Bible.
days.
Yeah. And from that standpoint, what I did in that 11 days was drop 24 pounds of toxic buildup in the body. But most importantly, I broke down the visceral fat. Fasting is the fastest way to address the most toxic fat in the body because it forces the immune system to focus on the body's greatest needs first while it turns its focus from the body's greatest process, which is digestion. You don't realize how much energy the body expels going through the process of digestion until you turn that off. And when you turn that off, you get this vicious rush of energy and light, insight, insight, and creativity restores. You start dreaming again. When's the last time you had a dream?
I actually dream pretty regularly.
That is a really positive sign of the health of your pineal gland, which is where the dream center is stored. But that's also where the trigger for natural health restoration is housed. In medical induction of a coma, they're triggering the body to go to sleep so that process can begin. Because most times during a medically induced coma, one, you're not eating. You're dependent on, where that happened, to fuel your body with water and food. In most instances, during medical induction of coma, a feeding tube will be put in to make sure that your body is not atrophying, from the lack of food intake over that extended period of time. But in most cases, what they're also triggering is the body's natural production of adipose, ketosis, autophagy. mTOR regulation of autophagy is what keto diets are trying to hit. What anyone that's practicing the keto mindset is trying to induce with food. As I said earlier, keto is great when you're doing it from a plant-based perspective. When you're prescribing to the meathead version, you're going to do a whole lot of harm. You're going to have a whole lot of adverse reaction once you stop that process.
Right. So loading up on things that are meats that are high in fat, like bacon and sausage and cheeses and
all red meats.
Yeah, that stuff isn't. And you just had the sense of that, like before you started, like this can't be 100% right, similar to the Atkins when that was a craze, and which is very similar. But
did you see Dr. Atkins, how he died?
A heart attack, right?
Do you know how much he weighed when he died?
No.
He was like 370 pounds. The creator of the Atkins diet, the no carb, nothing, and that also demonstrates how clinicians, when they produce these models, don't even fucking use them.
Right.
Because of their understanding outside of what they're selling.
That's crazy.
And yeah, so I mean, the rabbit hole gets so much deeper than the surface level stuff that we're talking. That I'm not going to get doom and gloom, but I have too many examples of healthcare using society as a guinea pig, to have better understanding in areas that they desire. especially in understanding the racial composition of this country and the tensions that you see brewing because of the power shift that's happening. There aren't enough white people having babies to sustain dominance from a racial perspective. And I don't want to focus there to highlight, the negatives in that. But, that's where you see too some of the elite mindset that's fostering some of the shit that we're seeing coming out negatively from current administration, and even his endorsement of some of those extremist mentalities is the realization that the dominance of a certain subset of society is going to shift, which is where the focus on this.
Well, the funny thing is, eventually everyone's going to be a mutt.
You know what I mean?
We already are.
If
if you really think about it, everybody is. Even going back years, when the Vikings used to invade different cultures, or
was brewed from Roman times, Roman days. The Romance languages are the areas of the world that Romans, had dominated, and we associate that now with love. We associate that now with, how we approach, relationships from a traditional standpoint. I'm going to touch a touchy subject real quick right here, but it's not in our human nature to settle down with one being for the rest of our lives.
Well, there's a lot of people that argue that.
Correct. And that's not a foreign thought. But religious context has programmed this mindset, into American understanding. Because when you look the world over, there's a running joke in Europe that most men are 22% gay because they're more open. They're more open to explore in those.
Well, they used to always say that
ways.
about the Greeks too. Remember that?
Correct.
Yeah.
We're seeing it in a lot of the shows that people watch. I'm not big into what the hell is the show based in. Like Spartacus demonstrated a lot of that, or what's the new one that people are into heavy?
Oh, geez, yeah, I don't watch many of them either.
So, but from that standpoint, it really shows you how business models have dominated, our thinking and our way of living for centuries. Can we really look at all religions as a whole, and can you really demonstrate with a straight face how they're not population control devices? Because when you look at the inception of society as a whole, you can't argue that mankind began in Africa. When you understand evolution and that school of thought, and then from there the world branched out. The first Asians were black from a skin tone perspective, and then the dilution of that. You get up into Europe. And the genetic mutation that were the Nords, even the Nordic Vikings, they were of ethnic descent. But then they're along the lines, that we had a mutation happen, and that's where albinos come from, and other variants of skin color. But even understanding populations that don't contain melanin in their skin, that in reality is a genetic default, which means that person is more susceptible to be
sunburnt
by the sun than someone with more melanin. I don't use sunblock.
But isn't that a misconception, though, that people with melanin in their skin don't still need to protect themselves from the sun?
That is a misconception, because black people still do burn when you have overexposure.
Or they can get skin cancer.
Correct. All of those things. But the number one cause of skin cancer is not your lack of melanin. It's using the wrong substance to protect your skin out in the sun. They're actually proving today that sunblock is the leading cause of skin cancer today.
Really?
Because it's turning off your body's ability to absorb the sun properly in its full spectrum balance. It's blocking UVA, UVB when there's so many other ranges within that light spectrum that we need that complete chain of nutrition.
But what about that pale redhead that goes out there and gets scorched?
You're not using the right stuff. If you switch to virgin cold press,
well, let's say they don't use anything and they get scorched.
You're eating wrong. Because
you think that's it?
100%. You're eating wrong because your skin does not contain.
You don't think they need that melanin to protect? No.
If you just started using,
but my skin's darker. I can go.
This is true.
Not my hands right here.
And I've seen you tan. But the fact of the matter is your skin is more sensitive to the sun because of its lack of pigment. If you were to use, or someone, that's pale, uses virgin cold pressed coconut oil on their skin before they go out into the, sun exposure a day at the beach, they'll receive all of the health benefits of the sun with none of the adverse, because you've encapsulated your skin with a layer of saturated fat that can better bring that nutrition into the body.
Okay.
So, from that standpoint, no sunblock, virgin cold pressed coconut oil.
All right, so it's just something else, a more natural solution then.
Correct.
Now, 2 questions for you real quick before we wrap it up. I wanted to go back to the water there. So with the distilled water, so first question would be, what is the distillation process, just so people have a general understanding of that? And then second question would be, wouldn't people be leery about how they buy the average bottle of distilled water in the store in the plastic jug, and them thinking like, well, doesn't that affect or contaminate the water in some way, shape, or form?
Absolutely. Valid questions. Great questions, actually. So the natural process of distillation is steam distillation. Whenever we have, like, for instance, after Hurricane Katrina down there in the South, whenever water contamination is of, alert, the warning that municipalities boil your water. Boiling water, raising it to 212 degrees Fahrenheit, the boiling point, will kill off all of the pathogens, bacteria, viruses that may be contaminated in the water supply. It's also going to remove the minerals and vitamins that were naturally occurring in that water as well, to bring it to its pure form. We just recently purchased a countertop home distillation unit that will process a gallon of water, 4 liters of water, every 10 minutes, if we keep filling it. And to your point about, being leery of what water is being, what distilled water is stored in, yes, plastic is horrible. The longer any substance sits in plastic, it starts to take on properties of that chemical component, which is the plastic. If I were to give you my list of storage of water, it's going to be glass, stainless steel, copper, glass, stainless steel, plastic would be the hierarchy of storage. And the reason copper is so phenomenal from a water storage standpoint is that the water will take on properties of the copper. Copper is one of the 13 essential minerals that the body needs to survive at its, in the most extreme. Again, the body needs 102 minerals, to function properly across all systems daily, but the 13, copper is one of those essentials. So, yeah, the longer, like I said, water is stored in plastic, the more toxic it can become. So that's why I am distilling bottled water instead of, tap water. Because when you distill your tap water, you're really going to see what's in it. Because all of the chemicals will be left in your distillation unit that you then have to clean out. And you'll see the scale.
All this residue on the bottom.
All of the nasty shit. It's black. It's gray. You don't know what that is.
The chlorine, the lime.
All of it. So, yeah, from a distilled water component, you would still want to you can consume it fresh out the bottle, and that's going to be way better than the options you're currently drinking.
Right.
Period.
Right.
You will still get some toxicity in it, but if it's important to you to clean that up, grab yourself a home distillation unit. They cost anywhere between $100 to like $250 if you're in a position to convert your whole home. They have water softening systems that range between like $3,500 to like $7,000, depending on how big your home is.
Now, someone came to my house before, like a door-to-door salesman selling
Rainsoft. They're the big one in this area here. They were selling those systems. They come in, they do a hard water test.
Right.
They demonstrate, what's wrong with your water, and then they sell you a system that can help clean it up.
Would that do the trick?
100%. It's going to alkalize your water. It's going to take the fluoride and all the hard minerals out of the water that you're consuming, out of your faucets, out of your sink.
So then I could use regular tap water at that point.
At that point, it'd be safe.
Yeah.
Safer to consume it, but
you might still run it through a home distillation unit.
Correct, because the piping in your homes still got all that built up residue
right.
from the years of what used to run through it. And if it's a fresh built home, drink that water. Completely safe to do. But I would still just distill that as well, because in most of those systems, they're using salt and other, like charcoal filters to pull that stuff out, which will leave traces of that filtration process in it. But it will be far less than what it was, previous to it. So, yeah.
Damn. Well, Dan, this has been a lot, George. I think we got a lot in here. I think that people can take with them. In particular, like you said, your main point about the drinking water is one step that I think a lot of people can do pretty easily, and make a big difference in what they're doing along with their health. I'd love to have you back on. I think there's a lot of topics we can dive into.
We're just scratching the surface, man.
Just hitting the surface. Where can people find you, or what do you have going on right now?
Right now, I mean, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Jorge Lopez on both. But I would prefer people to reach out through my lily pad oils business page, which is www.mydoterra.com/lily, LILY, pad, PAD, oils. You can reach me there, send me an email. Those that, have personal connection, feel free to reach out. Would love to have more of this conversation with anyone that's interested in cleaning it up and learning how to, live a better, more fulfilling life on your terms and not the business models that are serving us improperly.
For sure. And anybody who has questions about this podcast or wants to reach out, you can always catch us on my social media, which is Storytime with Boots for Facebook and Instagram. Twitter is StorytimeWBoots, so definitely reach out. Let me know if you have any questions. Maybe I'll put a poll up or two for everybody. But, George, thanks again. It was great, man.
Boot, appreciate your time, man.
All right, buddy. Till next time.
For all you can eat, well, I'ma stuff my face to a funky beat. We're gonna walk inside and just whip up, put the food on my plate and some coke in my cup. Give me some chicken, franks and fries, living past me and lettuce on my passage by. So you shoveling